Let's dive into Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature. You give us some fascinating excerpts, and I'm really curious to see what we find as we go through this.
Yeah, Greene's always got something to say, that's for sure. I think what I find most interesting is his argument that, even with all our tech and everything, human nature is still this driving force, this powerful, unpredictable thing. Especially now with social media, it really makes you think.
It really does. All these new tools, but we're still running on the same, basic instincts.
Exactly. And Greene's saying that ignoring that can lead to, well, some serious problems. He uses the 2008 financial crash as a pretty stark example. Even experienced investors, they got swept up in it. All that lure of easy money, fear of missing out those emotions, they led to, well, some really irrational choices. And that contributed to the crash.
Right. Makes you wonder, how often are we making decisions based on, gut feeling over rational thought, especially with social media and how fast trends and emotions can spread?
Definitely something to think about. We're just constantly bombarded with information and opinions, and it's so easy to just get carried away by it all. Greene really wants us to step back and become what he calls master interpreters of how people act. Analyze what they do, not just what they say.
It's so important to be able to, read between the lines. He talks about the halo effect, which I think we've all experienced, right?
Yeah.
You meet someone charming, good-looking, and you just assume they're also trustworthy and smart.
Oh, absolutely. Classic trap. Happens all the time. I mean, look at political campaigns. Image over substance. Greene's urging us to look deeper, to question those first impressions, really examine people's actions and what motivates them, Don't just be swayed by a flashy smile or a good speech.
It's like he's giving us this toolkit for understanding how to deal with all this complexity. And speaking of complex, he talks about this Athenian statesman Pericles, who was obsessed with finding true rationality in a world by emotion. I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, yeah. Pericles was a fascinating guy. He lived in this time of just huge upheaval and change, and he believed that the key to progress and, keeping things stable was to cultivate what the Greeks called nous. It's this concept of, both mind and intelligence, but also like a kind of universal reason, something that brings order to all the chaos of human affairs.
So how did he actually, use that idea when he was a leader? It seems almost impossible to be completely rational in a world where emotions are so strong.
Well, for him, it wasn't about just, getting rid of emotions altogether. He understood that the Athenians were very passionate about their city, and he used that, channeled that energy to make their democracy stronger. He saw the goddess Athena, she represents wisdom in strategic thinking, as the ultimate symbol of nous. It's interesting how he used this ancient idea to make decisions and inspire people.
It does make you wonder, can we cultivate that nous in our own lives?
Yeah.
Especially today when, things can feel so irrational.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Maybe it's not about reaching some, perfect state of pure reason, but more about understanding our emotions and managing them, finding that balance where we can, use the power of our emotions without letting them, totally run the show.
Right. It's about that balance, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to Greene's idea of the emotional self, and he talks about these two levels of irrationality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing we've all experienced both of these at some point.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. Greene calls it low-grade irrationality, which are those everyday moods and feelings that affect how we make decisions. Think about that time you maybe skipped a job interview because you woke up feeling down, or, how a salesperson might flatter you to make you buy something.
Oh, for sure. Or even judging someone based on how they look. We all do it, those snap judgments.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the high-grade irrationality, which is where your emotions are just going crazy, leading to, those impulsive, sometimes even dangerous behaviors. Greene uses gamblers as a good example.
Mm-hmm.
Winning, feeling invincible, and then crashing down. Have you ever felt that kind of that whirlwind of emotion?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think we've all had those moments where our emotions kind of take over, whether it's, anger or just doing something reckless in the heat of the moment. Greene's saying, if we understand these patterns, if we know what triggers us emotionally, then we can start to, make better choices.
Exactly. Self-awareness is key. And it's also really important when it comes to understanding other people. That's where empathy comes in. Greene talks about two types of empathy that are essential for navigating, the social world.
Two types. Okay. I'm interested. Tell me more.
So you have physical empathy, which is about mirroring someone's body language and their emotions to build, rapport and connection. Like when you instinctively smile back at someone who smiles at you, or you might, shift your posture to match the person you're talking to. It's the subtle way of, building trust and understanding.
Right. It's like we're wired to connect on a physical level.
Yeah.
What about that second type?
Greene calls it analytic empathy. It's about, well, going deeper, gathering information about, the person's background, what they value, what they've been through to really understand why they do what they do, what motivates them, and how they see the world. It's not just about feeling what they feel, but, understanding why they feel that way.
That sounds pretty difficult, especially if you're dealing with someone who's, well, just difficult, or someone whose views are just totally different from yours.
Yeah, it can be tough, for sure. But Greene tells this story about Anton Chekhov, the Russian writer. Chekhov had this unique way of empathizing with even the most, challenging people. He would imagine their whole life story from their point of view, trying to understand the experiences that made them who they are and how they came to believe what they believe. It's this powerful technique to move past judging people and seeing that shared humanity in everyone, even the ones who really test our patience.
That's such a good point, especially now when the world feels so divided. But what about those people who just seem to lack empathy completely? Greene talks about deep narcissism, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Deep narcissism is, well, it's a fascinating, if kind of disturbing, part of human nature. Greene outlines the main characteristics, and they're all about, being self-absorbed, seeing other people as tools to use, and that just that constant need for attention and admiration.
He gives some pretty extreme examples, like the story of Stalin and his cult of personality. It's kind of scary to think how a deep narcissist can gain so much power and the damage they can do.
Oh, absolutely. And it's important to be able to recognize those patterns. Greene really stresses how important it is to pay attention to nonverbal cues.
Mm-hmm.
Those can often tell you what someone's really thinking and feeling, even if their words are saying something else.
Right. He talks about Milton Erickson, the psychiatrist.
Yeah.
He was known for being so good at picking up on those nonverbal cues. And he was especially interested in the differences between how men and women communicate. Right?
Yeah, he was. Erickson believed that by paying attention to even the tiniest gestures, like a quick facial expression or a small shift in posture, we could learn so much about what's going on inside people's heads. He said those nonverbal cues often speak louder than words ever could.
Like learning to read a secret language. And once you know that language, you can start to see signs of, are they lying? Are they being hostile? Or are they actually, connecting with you?
Exactly. It's about becoming more tuned in to those little signals, those micro expressions that show our real emotions, even when we try to hide them. Greene gives some really practical tips on what to look for, and it's amazing how much you can learn just by watching how people move and interact.
Like he's giving us this superpower to see past the facade and understand what's really driving people's behavior. And speaking of things that are hidden, he brings up this idea of the shadow, which I think we should definitely dive into more after we come back.
So this shadow, it's a really powerful idea, and I think people get it wrong a lot. Greene's using, Carl Jung's work here, the idea that the shadow is like the dark side of our personality, the impulses and desires we think are bad, so we try to hide them from ourselves even.
Sounds like a villain hiding inside all of us. And Greene's saying that the more we try to push it down, the more likely it is to, explode in some way.
Exactly. He says it can show up in all these different ways, like acting in ways that contradict ourselves or seeing our own bad qualities in other people. Like, have you ever judged someone really harshly for something that, deep down you kind of dislike about yourself, or felt drawn to a leader, someone charismatic but maybe a little dangerous because they embody those darker urges we try to keep hidden?
He uses Nixon, with Watergate, how paranoid he got, as an example of how destructive the shadow can be. Even people with lots of power aren't immune to it.
For sure. It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
But Greene's not trying to scare us or anything. He thinks facing our shadow is actually how we grow and avoid, self-sabotage.
Okay, but how do we do that? How do we, shine a light on those hidden parts of ourselves and not just make things worse?
Well, he says we should look at our childhood. What traits were we shamed for or told to suppress? And Who are we fascinated by? Certain people, groups, they might be reflecting parts of our own shadow back at us. It's about seeing our blind spots, the things about ourselves we don't want to admit to.
Sounds like it could be, well, a little unsettling, but if it means being more self-aware and maybe even using those shadow parts for good, it might be worth it.
Totally. By understanding our shadow, we can take those hidden pieces and put them to use in creative ways, productive ways. It's about becoming whole, integrating the light and dark and just accepting the complexity of who we are.
Greene also talks about gender roles, how they can be limiting in our potential and our relationships. He brings up Caterina Sforza, this warrior countess. What's her story?
Oh, Caterina Sforza was amazing. She just totally defied what women were supposed to be back then. She was a diplomat, a fighter, a mother, and she even supported the arts. She combined these, what we think of as masculine and feminine qualities, and she became a real force in Renaissance Italy.
It's fascinating how she could, change her approach depending on what the situation called for. Sometimes all charm and diplomacy, other times tough and strategic. Shows how powerful it can be to use, all of our qualities, not just the ones society says we should.
Exactly. Makes you think, how can we all tap into those repressed parts of ourselves, the masculine or feminine, depending? What potential are we missing out on? Could embracing those qualities make us more creative, more ourselves, and lead to a more fulfilling life?
That's a really interesting thought. And Greene doesn't shy away from love and relationships either. He's got a pretty unique perspective on it.
Yeah, he gets into the maybe the less romantic side of love, how it can make us see things that aren't really there, and how it can lead to, well, some pretty messed up behavior sometimes. He uses Jungian psychology here, specifically the anima and animus, these archetypes of the feminine and masculine that we all have inside us.
I'm not too familiar with those. Can you explain a bit more?
Sure. So Jung believed we all have these unconscious images of the ideal man and woman based on our own experiences and cultural myths. And the anima and animus, they affect how we see and interact with the opposite sex.
So you're saying we're basically projecting these ideal images onto our partners, which can cause both intense attraction, but also, big disappointments down the line.
Exactly. Greene says we often fall in love with the projection, the fantasy we've created, not the real person.
Yeah.
He uses the story of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, and her relationships as an example of how love can be both amazing and heartbreaking. It's a good reminder that self-awareness is so important in relationships.
The more we understand our own projections and, those unconscious patterns, the better we can handle the whole complicated mess of love. And speaking of complicated, Greene also talks about finding our purpose. And he makes a distinction between, true purpose and false purposes, like just chasing money or attention.
Right, and he gives examples of people who really found their calling, like Coco Chanel, who just changed the world of fashion. Her story shows how, when you have that strong sense of purpose, it fuels your creativity, makes you resilient, even when things are tough.
It really makes you think about your own motivations, right? Are we chasing, fleeting pleasures and validation from other people? Or are we after something deeper, something that really speaks to our soul, something that actually contributes something good to the world?
That's a question worth asking ourselves. Might be a little scary, but it can lead to a much more fulfilling life.
Definitely. And, once we start to understand ourselves better, we also need to understand how groups influence us. Greene gets into that, how groups can be powerful, but also, potentially dangerous.
Yeah, he talks about groupthink, how easy it is to fall into that trap. Everyone goes along with the crowd, even if it's a bad idea, because nobody wants to rock the boat. It's like this collective blind spot where the need to fit in overpowers, logic and good judgment.
And then there's tribalism, where a group gets so focused on their own identity and what they want that they forget about the bigger picture, the common good. We see that everywhere, right? Politics, social issues. It's like people are digging in deeper and deeper.
It's a worrying trend. Greene reminds us that even though, we're hardwired for tribalism, we also have the capacity for reason, for empathy, for cooperation. He wants us to develop what he calls group intelligence, which means understanding how groups work, seeing the potential problems, and using their power in positive ways.
So how do we actually build that group intelligence? How do we create groups that are effective but also ethical? Groups that can, achieve their goals without sacrificing fairness and compassion and respect?
Well, he says it's about encouraging different perspectives, making sure everyone can speak freely, and setting clear values and goals that benefit everyone. Creating a culture where people collaborate, respect each other, and everyone feels like they're valued and can contribute.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected and that what we do, even small things, can have a big impact on other people.
Exactly. It's about understanding that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves, and that if we want to thrive, we have to learn to work together in a way that's both effective and ethical.
Now, Greene doesn't shy away from discussing death either. It might seem like a heavy topic, but he actually thinks that confronting our own mortality is important for living a full life.
Yeah, he shares this really moving story about Flannery O'Connor, an amazing writer who had to face her own mortality very directly. She was diagnosed with lupus when she was young, and she used that experience, the knowledge that her time was limited, to fuel her writing. She didn't let it paralyze her. It became a source of inspiration and motivation for her.
It's a powerful reminder that even when we're facing, the fact that our time is limited, we can still find meaning and purpose. Her dedication to her craft, her refusal to let her illness define her, it's truly inspiring. But it can be hard to really grasp that concept, that our time here is finite.
It is, but Greene thinks that embracing our mortality can actually make us feel more alive. Knowing that our time is precious can inspire us to really appreciate the present moment, to let go of those little worries and to focus on what truly matters.
It's like a wake-up call, reminding us that we shouldn't waste time on things that don't bring us joy or align with what we believe in.
Exactly. And it leads to this profound question for all of us. How can knowing that we're going to die inspire us to live more fully, more authentically? What do we want to leave behind? What impact do we want to make?
Those are big questions, and I think they're questions that we'll keep exploring as we go deeper into Greene's ideas. It really is amazing when you think about it, how everything we do can affect other people. Like we're all part of this huge web.
Yeah. And Greene's work really brings that home, doesn't it? It's not just about, understanding human nature in theory. He wants us to use that understanding to make things better, both for ourselves and for the world.
It's like he's saying, okay, you've seen how it all works. Now what are you going to do about it? Like a challenge.
Exactly. He wants us to be more aware, more intentional in how we interact with people, to remember that we have a choice in how we react to everything, even when things are tough.
One thing that really stuck with me is how important he thinks self-awareness is. It's like the basis for everything else he talks about.
You're right. He says that if we don't really know ourselves, we just end up, reacting to whatever's happening around us. But when we're self-aware, we can make our own choices, shape our own lives instead of just letting life happen to us.
He's giving us the tools to navigate all this complex human stuff. And one of those tools is, facing our own mortality. It seems kind of strange, but he says that accepting that we're going to die can actually make us feel more alive.
It's about realizing that our time is limited. It can inspire us to focus on what really matters, let go of the small stuff, and really go after what we're passionate about. It makes you ask yourself, am I spending my time on the right things? Am I living according to what I believe in?
Yeah, it makes you think about what your priorities really are. If you knew you didn't have a lot of time left, what would you do differently?
Exactly. And Greene even says that thinking about death can help us get over our fear of, failing or being rejected.
Yeah.
Because once you accept that, everyone dies eventually, those other fears don't seem so big anymore.
It's like your whole perspective changes. The stakes aren't as high, and you're more willing to take risks, chase your dreams, because you know that time is running out.
It can be really freeing, actually. Acknowledging our mortality helps us get out of our comfort zones, be okay with not knowing what's going to happen, and just live with more purpose, more urgency, like making every moment matter.
Greene also says that, understanding human nature isn't something you just learn once and you're done. It's something you keep working on, keep reflecting on. It's about being aware of our own biases, our blind spots, the fact that we're all capable of good and bad things.
And it's about using that awareness to make better choices, to develop those qualities that will make our lives better, more meaningful. Qualities like empathy, resilience, purpose, integrity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are you taking away from it? What really spoke to you?
I think for me, it's that idea of of how connected we all are. We're not just individuals, off doing our own thing. We're part of this huge, complex web of relationships. And what we do affects other people, even little things like being kind or being brave. Those things can ripple out and make a difference in ways we might not even see.
I love that. It reminds us that we all have the power to make a positive impact, to be part of something bigger, and that even when things are really hard, there's always hope, always a chance for growth and change.
Yeah, beautifully said. And for everyone listening, remember, this deep dive is just the start. We hope you'll keep reading The Laws of Human Nature and see how Greene's ideas can help you, unlock your own potential and live a life that's more fulfilling, more meaningful.
This has been an incredible journey. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah.
And until next time, keep being curious, keep asking questions, keep searching for those deeper understandings.